Good evening and welcome to Mindful Live 170. I'm your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 17th of the first month in the year of our Lord 2023. Thank you for joining in. This evening we're starting, unfortunately, talking about crime, but at least this evening the angle of crime would be on a bit more of a positive side, on a bit more of a positive view. As I was looking at probably you might consider it a heartwarming story over over there in the news in Diego Martin, where they were having a peace walk. A peace walk. And sometimes, even myself included, you could tend to be very cynical about things like this. Blessed night, Jonathan Charles. You could tend to be very cynical about things like this. I mean, a peace walk, what is a peace walk going to do? You all are just going to walk around the community, and the bad men going to still remain bad men. You could tend to feel a bit cynical about things like this, especially if you're familiar with how things often roll in these kind of realms. But I think nonetheless it's in a positive direction. It's a positive thing. It shows that some people who might themselves be involved to some extent, at least they have some vision of a direction out of the violence and the criminality. So we're going to start off with that article out there from Diego Martin. Diego Martin man gives up crime, leads peace march. All right. A Diego Martin community leader wants to meet with Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley to discuss ways to reduce crime in the area. Quincy Felix made the request during the Peace March / motorcade that he hosted in the vicinity of Bagatelle on Sunday. Dozens of people, accompanied by officers from the Western Police Station, took part in the march, chanting as they made their way through the streets, "What we're walking for, peace and love." Jay says, "I don't believe that there were any killers in that walk, nor any criminals for that matter." Well, you say that, Jay, but I was reading in some comments, they were saying that some of the men in that walk were known in the area for what they were known for. So I don't know. I'm not a Diego Martin guy. I didn't look at the faces very closely, so I do not know personally, but I'm just going with what I read. What I read is that some of these men may have once been involved, and it's not unheard of, because that has happened before. Chris 868 says the car robbery that was disrupted by a sting operation and two good boys gone, one critical. Yeah, I saw that. We're going to dive into that too. Felix admitted that he was once involved in crime and apologized to the community. He pledged to do everything in his power to prevent another young person from making the same mistakes. For me to do anything, for me to show a youth not to go down the direction that I went down, I'm willing to do it. And I'm willing for the government, the Prime Minister, for himself to come and check in his constituency. Mr. Imbert, we need to see you concerning to what going on in the area, Felix said. And sometimes we feel, as I was saying, sometimes we can be cynical about this, but many men do indeed change their lives from a life of crime. The average criminal fits a demographic. It's a young male between the ages generally of 16 to 25, grew up in probably a single mother household and in tougher situations. That's generally the demographic of violent criminals. Unfortunately, you could select it like that. Very often though, some of these young men, I was reading an article out of Canada where they were showing some studies done on young men with the most susceptibility to ending up in a life of crime. And one of the ways they were able to, as it were, cure this life of crime was basically lock the boys up from the age of 16 to 28 and then let them go after that, and everyone is fine. Chris 868 says, "Few numbers do change their lives to a path of good and do plead to others to do the same." And even some of those who don't change their lives to a life of good, very often after they leave that youthful phase, they often phase out from at least the cutting edge of the risk-taking violence. And what actually scares most people in the country isn't just the sale of drugs. And we know a lot of the violence, a lot of what we see is because of the sale of drugs. But really and truly, I think if you do a survey of the average citizen in the country, a law-abiding citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, and ask them how much they care about the dealers of drugs in terms of drugs by itself, many don't care that much. It's that kind of thirsty level of violence that gets people really worried when they see that very risky violence that the young men are generally capable of. That's what scares people. Running in with a rifle at 12 midday to kill someone, that's the part that gets people worried. And many of those people are just young men who fit that demographic group. And as I was saying, the study was pointing out that if there was some possible way to disappear those young men and reappear them at 29 into society, a lot of the violence would be decreased. Jay says most single mothers, these independent women, need to stop downplaying the role of father. Yes, we agree with that. So maybe some of the intervention that goes into these communities could be aiming at something very similar. When you hear people talk about sports and having various avenues, it's kind of the same idea they're talking about. If you could grab a young man full of energy and verve at 16 and lose him into football or into basketball or into cricket or some sport, you lose him in that sport. He's training 3 times a week. He has game at least once or practice game twice for the week. He is involved in it. He's looking at it. He is absorbed in the sport. Maybe you might be able for that young man to disappear for the entire period from 16 to 29, and when he leaves the youthful sporting time, he's then a more mature adult who isn't going in that direction. So even talking about the building a field and pushing sports and pushing the extracurricular activities, it does have its place in reducing the kind of crime that we see in Trinidad and Tobago. And really and truly, the stage that we are at, we would be looking at the kind of anything helps kind of direction. Long as we have grounds and certain things to keep activities, it will always, long as we don't have grounds, I suppose he means, it will always have idleness. And as the people say, the devil like idle hands. So we need to change that. Residents in the community appreciated the initiative. Like this Walk and elderly resident said, the police felt the same. Sergeant Adams of the West End Police Station said not too long ago, crime in Carnage was out of control until residents got together to achieve peace. He said if that strategy could work there, it could work in Diego Martin. Quoting from him here, they came together and they're going strong. You know, I am a member of the community and it happened in Carnage and I want to see it happen here, and the police is always here to support. And I'll be more specific. If there are any underlying issues, my door is always open. We could trash it out, Adams said. And the probably dirty reality of some of these walks and trashing out and ending the squabbles. When we have, user says, when we have governments who support community leaders, crime will only worse. Well, that is true. I think Kirvan says, I think evil is real and the people have become more evil. I don't disagree with that either. But a dirty reality of these treaties that cause crime to decrease, etc., is sometimes the people involved in the walk still continue their life of crime. They just leave the violent crime out of it. You think in Carnage that the people who ran the blocks in Carnage stopped selling on their blocks? No, very likely they're still selling there. It's just that somehow they came together and now they kind of start to figure out that, hey, this is business. And in this business, if we are able to keep it more peaceful, everyone makes more money. That's a disturbing way to think about it. But you could actually encourage people involved in criminality towards the line of peace, in that even in their criminal enterprises, there's more money, peace. There's less attention. But as some people were talking about in the news of criminality in Trinidad here, 2 shot dead by police in Barataria. And this is something that, to me, I've been wanting to see a lot more. It's not the police killing people. That's not what I'm talking about. But at least how they list that, how they write down that this happened, that this was a sting operation. If it indeed was, and what they say is true, I think the police could be doing a lot more of this. They're calling them Facebook bandits across certain platforms, and it's because they tried to set up the the robbery on Facebook. And so many of these things keep happening around the country. Two sides of it. One, I am sorry, I don't want to sound like I'm victim blaming, but if at this point, in the year of our Lord 2023, you're making sketchy deals on Facebook to go and meet someone on the corner of 6th Avenue in Barataria to exchange tens of thousands of dollars for some object, I mean, I don't want to say you're looking for it, but I mean, you're not looking for sensible outcomes. Let's be real. Let's be real here. And I find it so unbelievable that so many people are still caught in these extremely sketchy situations. And I believe a lot of the times, some of the people that are caught in those situations is because you like too much deals. You want the shady thing because it seems like it's too good to be true. And very often if it's too good to be true, it's because it's not true. So, yeah, stop going and buying B13 in the back of nowhere for $15,000. It's not worth it. Leslie Alexander says, the better educated you are, it's the vehicle to reduce violent crime. Yes, Leslie Alexander, it is true. I am yet to do a contemplation on that. One of the strongest correlations, and this gets into a lot of interesting topics. One of the strongest correlations are between IQ and the tendency to engage in violence. People with lower IQs engage in violence much higher than people with higher IQ. It's one of the strongest correlations that you could see. There's no doubt about it. Now, it's not to say that people who are smarter are better. It's not that. It's just that violence is a solution. Many people don't like to think about it, but yes, violence is a solution. It might not be the best solution. It might not be the only solution, but it is a solution. And generally speaking, people who are less educated or who might not be as sharp of mind, they may not be able to figure out some of the more complex solutions. Good night, Glenroy, Dennis Tobago. Welcome, sir, welcome. If you are not as educated, you are or as not as sharp in the mind, you might not be able to figure out more complicated and complex solutions for your problem. So when someone opposes you, you don't have time or thought to figure out and go and get a lawyer and go and carry them to court and all of this. No. You oppose me, and the quickest thing I could think about is put them up. So education, to some extent, is directly involved in decreasing the levels of violence in the society. High IQ people who are violent tend to be more effective, though. Well, yes. Obviously. And that's what I was saying. It's not that they aren't violent. It's not that they are good or better per se. It's just that solutions. They are able to think up of more varied solutions than just violence. So you want to decrease violence, generally speaking, education is a positive outlet for that. 2 shot dead by police in Barataria. 2 men were fatally shot, 1 held, and 3 firearms recovered by police officers this afternoon, following a sting operation into a spate of Facebook robberies in the Barataria district. So these guys were selling a B13, right? It's a B13 they were selling. A B13 ain't going for anything more than what? 12,000 somewhere up there. 3 gunmen for a B13 robbery? Wow. Guns are easy to get. Like, there was once upon a time, if 3 men going for a robbery, there is only 1 gunman and 2 assistants. Now, guns so easy to get. 3 men going for a robbery, 3 of them have the guns. And it turns out it was actually only 2 were on the action side of the robbery. One was a driver. So if you're the driver, what are you doing with a gun too? You're supposed to be driving. The other vehicle to reduce crime is when you bring purpose to your life. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. But that's a difficult one to tie down. It's a difficult one to tie down when you're talking about purpose for your life. You're talking about what's the purpose of life. Good night, HB Nikki Groupie. Yeah, you're talking about what's the purpose of life. And very often, the reality is religion fills a large part of that role. And what we see in modern times is very often people throw out religion and like, nah, that doesn't make sense. All these old mysticisms and superstitions, and you just throw them out. And the unfortunate thing is you have nothing to replace it. So you end up with purposeless nihilists just drifting along in their lives with nothing to do. According to police reports on January 17, during the period 12:30 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., police officers attached to the Northeastern Division Intelligence Unit, NED Task Force and Barataria Criminal Investigations Department responded to a Facebook ad in which a vehicle was being offered for sale. Acting on information, police officers proceeded to 11th Street, Barataria, where two suspects who were allegedly armed with firearms approached an unmarked police vehicle and pointed the firearms at plainclothes police officers. Other police officers who were in other unmarked police vehicles parked nearby announced their presence, and the men allegedly point the firearms in the direction of those officers. The lawmen, in keeping with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service's use of force policy, discharged their weapons in the direction of suspects. One of the men then took off running towards the maritime roundabout where he allegedly dropped a firearm onto the roadway. He then ran east onto 10th Street and entered a white Nissan B13 in an attempt to escape. Police officers gave chase after the vehicle and the suspect pointed a firearm at their direction. The officers, again, keeping with the TTPS use of force policy, discharged their firearms in the direction of the man, wounding him. Both suspects were then conveyed to the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex in Mount Hope, where they were pronounced dead on arrival. Their identities remain unknown at this time. The driver of the white Nissan, a 38-year-old man of Coconut Drive, Morva, was conveyed to the Barataria police station, where he is assisting detectives with their investigation. I believe the two dead men were identified as people. Blessed night, Nikki BG, who had been identified as men from, I believe it was Never Dirty Move. Junior Kelly once said, hungry days may want to change our pace, the youths them brain at a desolate place. The thing is, I don't think these youths are robbing people because they are hungry. I think that's a dishonest view. Many people of certain political or ideological dispositions tend to think that criminality is all because people are lacking in physical goods. They're robbing people because they're poor and they don't have no work and they need a job. No, many of them are robbing people because they are given to lives of criminality. They are deviant, behaved people anyway. So it's not just that they are in difficult times. Good evening, wonderful night to you too, Adish Ramnaran over there on Instagram. You know, as I was saying, I think sting operations like this should be a regular thing in Trinidad and Tobago. Because, yes, one, the people who are constantly being victims of this kind of obvious robbery are not being very smart on their path. But the bandits at the same time very often put themselves out into the open. They make themselves very vulnerable. They don't know who they're robbing, just as you don't know who you're buying from. They don't know who they're going to rob. So these things are actually very easy to be possible. Very easy. No bandit should be feeling comfortable to walk up to a random vehicle and just rob the people. But you know what would help to solve that? One of the things that I regularly talk about on my lives. If each person was armed, I'm sure some of these robberies would have looked a lot different. If you're walking up to a vehicle and you know that the people inside of that vehicle may very well be armed, yeah, you aren't going to be processing that whole thing the same way as you would have if you know that they are all unarmed and sitting ducks there. You aren't processing that. See? Leslie Alexander says word. All right, yes. So the sting operations, I find this is something. I mean, I congratulate the police on this, but I think these are things that we are supposed to be seeing a lot more. I remember, was it in one of these lives also that we were here? I was seeing someone talking about why don't we see more undercover police in Trinidad and Tobago. No, I mean, you may not see them because they are undercover. You aren't meant to notice them, but you could wonder about that. It's like where are the news stories about these kinds of operations that should be happening much more regularly? Much more regularly. We have the resources to do things like this, so I think we should be doing a lot more of it. Police are not supposed to be patrolling with blue lights all the time. I agree. It could also promote robbers to fire without reason. Now the thing is, yes, it could technically promote robbers to do that, but if you come to do a robbery and fire before you even see the person, generally speaking, you aren't on the regular playing field of regular bandit, and you are going to be caught very quickly. When a bandit generally is coming to rob someone, the ideal for a bandit is for that person to give up their goods with as little fight as possible and never report it to the police. That's what the bandit wants. They don't want the person to take time. They don't want the person to injure them. They don't actually even want to injure the person because that's going to draw additional attention to them. So even if it encourages them to fire without a reason, that's just going to encourage them to get more easily caught. Now, I was reading an article earlier today talking about how the government runs businesses. How the government runs businesses, because the state enterprises out there and the money they make and what we're supposed to be doing with them. And I regularly talk about this. Unfortunately, it seems like the PNM, our current ruling party, they really love that kind of view where they believe that the government has the capability of running lots of businesses. The state enterprises are the key for prosperity in this country. They aren't really on this each person make their own entrepreneurial way. They aren't on that train really and truly. The entrepreneurs and business people that the PNM seems, I'm using the word seems to here. I'm talking about just how it seems. The business people that the PNM seems to like, you have to be in business for the last 30 years and already a millionaire, and then they will like you. But if you're now trying to just jump into this business for it, no. Leave that for experienced business people. And for the state, they will give you a job, a government work, and you'll go and work in your government work and stay there and be happy. So I was reading an interesting letter to the editor speaking about the strange occurrence of state enterprises and state entrepreneurs. State entrepreneurs do not exist in TNT. The term state entrepreneur is right up there with other oxymorons like military intelligence and honest politician. Yet, in the Express Business of January 11, economist Mary King argues for an increased role for the state as entrepreneur, the government to take charge of a national innovation system along the lines of the triple helix. And the person is criticizing this, but that's a regular call you see from, as I said, certain people with certain kind of ideologies on how politics and government is supposed to run. They always seem to believe that if the government takes a more important and larger role in certain activities, it's going to go better. Like, okay, we are struggling right now with the healthcare system. What would make it better is if the government takes more of a bigger role in it. And to me, I find it looks kind of back to front from that to me. If you want something to work well, get the government out of it, is how it seems to me. That's the way it seems more to me. The problem with King's concept is that there's no such thing as a state entrepreneur. There are only bureaucrats and public servants and politicians. If any of these people were entrepreneurs, they wouldn't be working for the state. So on what basis are these government officials qualified even to provide funding for would-be entrepreneurs? You see, I regularly speak about this. You see, as an entrepreneur, I remember we were talking about this, for example, with the carnival and the carnival bands and how we run carnival in Trinidad and Tobago. As an entrepreneur, the incentives are there. You have to provide the best product for your customer because that's how you make the most money. Apologies. Because that's how you make the most money. That's your incentive structure as an entrepreneur, as a business person. If you are not providing a good product for your customer, then you aren't going to make money. They aren't going to pay you any money. Adish Ramnayan says, questions, at least in TNT, has any government improved any business by getting involved in it? I don't know if that has ever happened anywhere in the world. So yes, as a private entrepreneur, that's your incentive structure. But as a government does not have that structure, where that incentive structure where they have to provide the best service for their customers. That is not how a government runs. If the government opens a fast food outlet and they serve you slowly, what are you going to do? You pay taxes to them at the threat of jail and prison. They take money from you at the threat of violence. So they don't have to provide an exceptionally good service to you. What are you going to do about it? They don't have that incentive structure. So the idea of putting anything business related under the hands of a government seems like a foolish idea. This is not to say that the government cannot play a role in facilitating entrepreneurship, but that is mostly a matter of getting out of the way of private enterprise. Government's main entrepreneurial role is therefore to protect private property, punish fraud, lower barriers to entry in all economic activities, reduce red tape, and close state enterprises to avoid crowding out the private sector. Notably, all political administrations have failed on all these fronts, especially since the 1970s. Listen, in Trinidad and Tobago, and this was a letter from one Elton Singh from Cuba, and this is correct. He laid out 5 main jobs of a government here. And if we look at this in Trinidad and Tobago, which one of these is the government successful at? Protecting private property. With the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago, we cannot honestly claim that the government does well at protecting private property. Punishing fraud. I mean, we're living in Trinidad and Tobago. We're talking about TNT here. Lower barriers to entry in all economic activities. Now, this is the problem that I say, especially with the PNM. It seems like they are particularly skilled at raising these barriers to entry. Nearly every time the PNM, I wonder if there's a statistic we could look at with this. The presence of new businesses opening under different administrations, and look at how it looks on the PNM versus other administrations. That would be an interesting statistic. Reduce red tape. Again, not our specialty. Not our specialty. Everything is more red tape. Everything is more red tape. Everything. Why did the PNM increase the VAT registration threshold? You'd have to ask them. Close state enterprises to avoid crowding out the private sector. No one is going to. And in the idea that state enterprises are almost never good at planning business ideas, it leads us straight down to this snail business. To the snail business. I made a contemplation about this. When I first saw this, did my Instagram drop? Did the Instagram drop over there? So what's going on with my video ended? Apologies to those who may have been viewing on Instagram. It seems like the video stopped on its own. But yeah, that brings more revenue for the government. However, you aren't VAT registered, you can't participate in bigger contracts. That's true. That's very true. And if they increase it, yes, it cuts out the smaller men. That is true. But I don't know. I didn't read up on their stated reasoning for doing that. So I cannot say for sure what I think their reason might have been. Still, we're now on the central farmers and the snails. The central farmers were like, we're not on this snail catching business. And I'm honest with you. When I first saw this, when I first, and you know, lots of people have this habit now where they imitate the official coat of arms and the ministry sign and the ministry words, and they post things on behalf of the ministry and say it's an actual ministry thing. I was like, wait, somebody doing a hoax on snails? Who's gonna do a snail hoax here? Why are you all doing this? You're all so idle. Not to know that it was real. They really have a bounty out on these snails. Wanted dead or alive snails. But then I read the number they were giving for this. $5 per kilogram of snail. Now, I don't know how many of you watched the contemplation I did on this. But let's do some maths. An adult giant African snail weighs on average 32 grams. These snails grow humongous. Just by the way, they grow extremely large. One of the largest snails. But you are unlikely to find an adult snail. The majority of snails you find are going to be somewhere between junior, infant snails and adult. So let's say an average of around 20 grams. That's giving you a lot because I feel they're going to be lighter than that. But let's say an average of 20 grams per snail. 20 grams into 1,000, which is 1 kilogram, gives you 50. So that means 50 snails gives you $5. If you're working out the maths there, that's 10 cents per snail. 10 cents per snail. Our minimum wage is $17, $17.50, somewhere there. 175 snails you'd have to catch in an hour to make minimum wage. What's wrong, Stefan Isaac? What's wrong there? Stefan Isaac, I am not guessing here, you know. I am not guessing here. You could Google, take out your phone, Google average weight of adult African snail. 32 grams. You are not going to catch only the full-grown adult African snails. You are going to catch mostly the juniors, the juveniles. So I am averaging a weight between the adult at 32 grams and the juniors probably at some ounces. And let's say 20 grams. 175 snails in an hour just to make minimum wage. $17.50 for 175 snails in an hour. Listen, these snails they stand a high chance of carrying a nematode. It's like a worm. They have a little worm in them that carries some deadly diseases. So this is a biological hazard. You have to buy, if you're trying to really do this sensibly, you'd have to buy gloves, at least gloves. How much for a rubber gloves? How much for a rubber gloves, someone? It's been a while. I haven't seen rubber gloves in a while. I haven't bought rubber gloves in a while to know the price. How many snails do you need to catch to make enough money to buy the gloves to catch the snails? $15. For a pair of good rubber gloves, $15. If it's $15, that's 150 snails. And then that's one problem. One problem is just the weight by itself. That's a struggle. But somehow, if you were able to find a really infested location, let's say you're able to scoop up 1,000 snails. Now, 1,000 snails at what, 10 cents for the snails is going to give you what, $100? Congratulations, you made some money. $100 with the 1,000 snails. Here's another problem with these snails. If you catch these snails dead, because if you want to catch most, very likely you're going to sprinkle the snail bait to catch, so all of them come out of their hiding places and you're able to just kind of scoop them up all in a quick batch and carry them off. From the moment the snail dies, it literally starts melting. I don't know how many of you have had interactions with these annoying pests. I have been fighting them for a while here. As soon as they die, they start to melt and smell disgusting. They turn into a slimy, gooey liquid, basically, as they die and melt out of the shell. So, let's say you catch your bag of snails on a Monday and you said, you know what, I'm going to really bunch up all of these snails. So I'm going to go through the week and drop it in on Friday. By the time Friday reaches, you are going to have a bum, a stink bum, and probably quarter of the weight of snails is going to be slime seeping out of the bag. We ain't talk about the gas to reach by the ministry. The gas to reach by the ministry plus the gloves. The gas to reach by the ministry plus the gloves plus the biological hazard plus the stench. Listen, you probably 1,000 snails gives you $100. To make this feasible, I think I need $1,000 for a trip of snails. I would need $1,000. Me personally, I would need $1,000. And that means I need to catch 10,000 snails. Listen, the snails could be how slow they want. Not catching 10,000 snails soon. Snails. It's not. Let's read the Central Farmers. Central Farmers reject giant African snail $5 bounty. Farmers in central Trinidad say the government's bounty on the giant African snail may just be an exercise in futility. Farmers said the $5 price per kilogram is not an incentive to collect snails because of the rising cost of fuel and food. Listen, the pipers down on my side aren't even tempted by that. I've seen pipers started back picking up bottles. Listen, if perchance a piper is listening into the live, you got some Wi-Fi somewhere and you're chilling and taking in a mindful life, Mr. Piper, sir, stay with the bottles. The bottles are more profitable. They are not a biological hazard. When you throw a bag of bottles on your back, you don't have to worry that the goo from the bottles is going to be leaking down your back as you walk. Brother man, walk the side of the road and pick up bottles. Any day that's more profitable. I'm trying to remember what became of the initiative to rid our sea of the lionfish. I don't know what became of it, but I remember in Tobago they were encouraging people to eat it, to prepare it in dishes. The thing is, I was reading this proposition about the bounty for snails. To be fair to the ministry here, this in Trinidad and Tobago isn't the first time it's been tried. Over in Barbados, they did the same thing. They did the bounty for snails over there. I believe it was 50 cents a pound or something like that they did, but that was in the early 2000s. And that's EC dollars, so it's a different calculation also. And nonetheless, Barbados is a smaller island than Trinidad, so catching these snails might still be more feasible. But in Barbados, when I was reading up on what they did over there, part of what they were encouraging is using the snails as feed. And that might be an idea. Maybe we need to figure out a way to mill snails into chicken feed or something of the such, and then they would actually be profitable to collect. find some other alternative use for this snail. That's what I would hope. Thank you by the double shed. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Nice to know. And going on the governments and government and their general inability to run things. I was reading another letter. Feed the snails to the lion. But what if the lionfish like these snails? What if the lionfish enjoy these snails? What are we going to do then? So we might get rid of the snails, but then we have a boost in lionfish population. The government seems really incapable at maintaining the roads too. If you've driven around recently, the roads all around Trinidad are horrible. They are a nightmare. Nearly every road. It's stressful. It really is stressful. Like, I don't know how those Starboys and their low profile tires with their drop low cars are surviving out there. I really don't know. Because I've been a Hilux driving over these roads and I am still like, geez, this road is horrible. So you in your drop low with the low profile tires, how you all going? How you all going, boss? How things? Not the one up by him, but so you made the road smooth. You'd swear the roads are built on an underground river. You'd swear that. Here's how to save our failing roads. And this is a letter to the editor by Fazir Khan, who is the JCC president. That's the Joint Consultative Council. Recognizes the efforts being made by the Ministry of Works to address the problem of our deteriorating road infrastructure as reported previously. It is heartening to see these infrastructure projects actually commencing at the beginning of the dry season this year. The Minister of Works is also on point in identifying three main factors that contribute to the stress on our road infrastructure as follows: WASA, funding, and overweight vehicles. Pressure, bro, because $5 for a 17-inch tire. Listen, I know those tires aren't cheap. Even over that didn't. Yeah. You see? Well, that's your MPN. I don't know what to say about that. That's your MP. Now, from my discussion with the chairman of the Tunapuna Regional Corporation, I would say that bit there is a counselor. That's not necessarily the minister directly. Is find out who is the counselor for Mr. Imboot's region, and that counselor is very likely licking boots. He is licking boots by paving Mr. Imboot's area. That's what's going on there. Because the councillors, the local government, would be in charge of those secondary and tertiary roads in community. That's not the ministry directly. The JCC wants to add a fourth item, which is the lack of proper roadside drainage infrastructure, only for the sake of emphasis, as we know that the ministry's engineers are aware of this problem as well, but they are severely constrained by funding as identified. Now, the JCC there spoke about it. And Stone, I didn't say anything about Stone anybody. The JCC spoke about it, but this is literally one of the major problems we have in. And I think it comes from the problem of maintenance in general. Roads cannot take water. It's the obvious thing. If you have water pooling on the road is going to deteriorate. It's just a matter of time before that road deteriorates, and very likely it's going to fail. You have to, when you pave the road, ensure that the water drains off the sides of the road. What you notice is on many of those back roads and side roads and secondary roads, etc., the reason the sides of the roads are so horrible is because water keeps pooling on the side of the road. No one has, they're paving the road and they haven't built a proper drainage system for these roads. And that's the same problem that the GCC is speaking about. And to me, this again shows the idea of government in the idea of government in management. Do you think, imagine if you hired a private company to build your road, a driveway, you have a big property, so you have one of those long winding driveways. And you hire a private company to build a driveway from your gate to your house. You think they're going to be as sloppy in building it as the government is? Trini Mike says makes you wonder what these engineers actually learning in university. What I notice after having some conversations too is that a lot of it has to do with the bureaucracy and the red tape and the compartmentalization. So the engineers in the engineering department might very well know about the drainage. They draw up something to do about that. And then they send that in for the financial part, the financial department to approve of the request. And the financial department says, well, we don't have the funds to do the whole project, so here's what we're going to do. The main part of the project is paving the road, so we'll pave the road and we'll X out the drainage part of it. These are the things that very often happens, and it's whose job is it and whose job it's not, and who doesn't care, and that's how these things get left out. Some drain same level as the road, no depth to hold water. As soon as the drain get water, it's running on the road. And even that, drain same level as the road. Some of the, you see, again, it's communication with the various different departments. Because the level of a drain has to do with the gradient you're trying to make in letting the drain run off. So, if you started building the drainage system for this community at the end of the community, and the drain you built there is 6 feet deep, then that means all of the drains throughout the rest of the community have to be 6 feet and shallower, because 6 feet has to be the deepest point. Now, we have unfortunate cases where, because of that same bureaucracy and compartmentalization, where a drain built down the road was built higher than the drain that is supposed to be draining into it. So now they have to attempt to raise this drain nearly above the level of the road to try and let the water drain down into where it's supposed to drain. A lot of these things are the problems. User says, just like Paria, those who are competent don't get the job, most who aren't get the job. It's not just about competence. It's not just about competence. It's the very incentive structure of governance. It's the very incentive structure of governance. So if you're an engineer in the government, you're getting paid for your engineering job. You apologies. You give your engineering recommendations, you send it up the chain. It's not your business what happens to it, and very likely different things are going to be cut from it. And by the end, when it reaches to the contractor, greetings. When it reaches to the contractor and the contractor builds what you initially recommended, people are going to be like, well, this engineer didn't know what he was doing. But they didn't take the engineer's full advice. And that's very often what happens. They take half of the advice, and then people may be blaming some of the wrong people inside of this. It's the very structure of the thing. It's like where people talk about too many cooks in a kitchen spoil the food. The government is run by 1 million cooks in the kitchen. That's how government is run. And anytime we find corruption happening in government, what we do is we add another cook in the kitchen and hope that that cook is somehow going to oversee different things to stop the corruption. And very often what happens is the corruption doesn't decrease. All that happens is the red tape increases and things become harder to be done, and people who are corrupt are still going to be. The new Golden Grove Bridge is lower than the Bailey Bridge. Well, maybe the Bailey Bridge was built higher. I don't know. The bridge is built in the river, and with the rain some time ago, it already flooded out. Wow. I didn't know that. There's a Bailey Bridge down my side. The bridge that was there fell into the river eventually. The Bailey Bridge is seeming like it's going to fall into the river very soon too. And you know what's so strange about this, again, with the government and how they run things? The government keeps dredging the river. They keep widening the river. This perplexes me. If you widen the river, running into a bridge that isn't being rebuilt and is at the same size of the narrower river, What do you think is going to happen to the river eventually? You keep narrowing that side of the river, and then the bridge is here where it's a choke point. Do you think it's going to happen? But again, not my job. So, the guy who is dredging the river, the guy in the excavator, his supervisor sent him out to dredge the river. He is dropped off there on the excavator. He's being paid to dig the river. He's digging it. You think the guy on the excavator can't look 50 meters down the road and see that there's a narrow bridge there that is going to be washed away if they continue digging here? But not my job. That's the job of who is to see about the bridge. I was hired to clean the river. And that's how it happens over on the large scale in government. That's the large scale of government. You hear the same thing with WASA. WASA has to run pipe, so they run pipe. Ministry of Works has to pave road, so they pave road. And in no particular order. The road would just be paved, WASA comes to run the pipe. Whose job is it? Captain Zeke says, so no checks and balances to make sure the final blueprint makes sense. Well, it's not only about making sense, it's about making dollars. Remember, the government runs on a budget. The government runs on a budget. So, yeah, the final blueprint, they would want it to make sense. But then they would want it in the right political timing. But then they would want to make sure who are their dependents in terms of the business field get their fair cut, well, unfair cut. They would want to do all of that. And when you have all of these different, as I said, different chefs in the kitchen, each person has to see about their own interest in this, then it kind of all falls on its face eventually. Feasibility study. Well, as you see over in Tobago, remember in Tobago, they built a whole stage in the sea without anything like a feasibility study, without an environmental impact study. These things are just formalities. If you try to build something in the sea without getting those things done, well, you might make a jail, but government is government. Government doesn't go to jail. They put people in the jail. All right. That's all I have for now, folks. Any further questions or comments before we dive out? Well, what? Captain Zeke says the stage would be part of the waterfront expansion should that project be approved. Captain Zeke, I know, but usually how those things are done is the first part has to be approved too. You don't go building in the sea and say, well, it's part of a larger project. When you approve the larger project, you would approve this. No, you already built in the sea. Give me back my taxes and the senseless government works can continue. Yeah, good luck with that, Weeks boss. Good luck with that. Glenn Ray Dennis says we need more prayers than ever. I do not deny that. More prayers, the better. But according to what prayers you're talking about, the Bible says faith without works is dead. So it's not just about prayers, I suppose. It's about actions too. And what you do. The thing is, the reality is, there's only one person you can control really, and that's a key part in understanding how and what you do in terms of all of the different things we see going on around the country. There's only one person you can control, yourself. So you work with yourself to make yourself make the best decisions possible, and that's pretty much the best you could, literally. Alright, folks, that's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And as per usual, this was brought to you by Mindful Education. Mindful with 2 L's, mindful_education is the name of our page over on Instagram if you want to go and follow us there. We are also on Facebook. We provide learning pods for children. We have classes. We have a preschool pod. We have an early primary pod. We have a late primary pod. We have early secondary pods and late secondary pods also. So if you are interested in any of these classes, we also provide private tutoring for CXC and CAPE subjects, most of the subjects we offer. If you are interested in these, get into contact with us. I will see you guys again tomorrow night for the next Mindful Live, which is going to be Tobago night, Tobago evening. All Tobagonians, make sure and jump in. Everybody jump in, really and truly. We will see each other again tomorrow evening around 9:50, 9:30, there and thereabouts. Nisi, be quiet. I will see you guys then. Peace. Hope you enjoy your night. Be safe out there. Laters, folks.